Happy Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to the fourth episode of the Sell That SaaS podcast. I'm so grateful that you have been along this journey for the past 3 episodes. We just cracked 1,000 impressions on Spotify, so we're making a name for ourselves, and I'm really excited to continue being your host. And today I have a special guest. His name is Logan Little. Logan and I met through our church, actually, on a golf outing, and I was really bad at golf, and he was kind of teaching me some tips. True story, by the way. And he was really, through that golf experience, just found him to be a nice stand-up guy. Then found out later he has over a decade of sales experience, from door-to-door to now software sales. And he's also a head coach at our church's gym. Our church has a gym called Redline. It's called Arena of Greatness. Yeah. We rent out a gym in North Scottsdale, and he leads it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every morning at 5 in the morning. So definitely a hard worker. I can't even make it to those workouts because I feel like it's too early. He's there every Monday, Wednesday, Friday as the coach. So really excited to have you, man.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah. So I guess let's start from the beginning of just kind of telling me about before we got on this podcast. He was telling me a little about his door-to-door sales experience. And I did door-to-door as well. I did pest control services, as well as door-to-door staffing in downtown Chicago, where I pitched CFOs on our services to basically staff their accountants. But it sounds like you've also done door-to-door, but in a much longer stint. I only did 3 to 1 year stints. Tell me about door-to-door, and I guess feel free to give yourself a general introduction of who you are and how some of those early sales experiences shaped who you are today.
Yeah. So I've been in sales for over a decade now. Started right when I was 18, grew up in the sales world. Actually, funny story is back in 6th grade when you decide, hey, you do a presentation on what kind of career you want to do. I did mine on sales. Wow. So I always kind of knew the lifestyle and being able to earn an income that to support a family and also be able to do family things is all kind of the reason why I wanted to be in sales in the first place. But I grew up in the real estate world and found myself in the door-to-door world being recruited on campus at Boise State and went out to my first summer. So this was a summer program with alarm systems. So similar to pest control, go out to a different market during the summertime, but it's 6 days a week, 9 to 10 hour days for the entire summer. So did that through school, and then even a couple of years after that. And so, with the door-to-door world, you learn to deal with rejection real quick. If you're selling 1 out of 20, 30, even 50 houses, you're doing pretty good.
Right.
You learn to also that self-discipline of continuing to be out there on your own. It's just a lot of really great experience at a young age of just how to grind through it a little bit.
Perfect. And so we heard about a little bit of your business background, but also I think the audience would love to know just about you personally. Like who is Logan Little?
Yeah. It's a lot. So you mentioned being involved with the church stuff. That's a big part of my life. Involved with our men's ministry. The gym that we work out with is not just a gym. It's a lot of we like to say pillars, but it's the spiritual pillar, the mental pillar, relational pillar. We have a close group of almost 50 guys who meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 a.m. To do things that are hard before we like to say great before 8. And so it's that's been a big part of my life. I've been in the CrossFit community for roughly 5 years, and so that was kind of big change in my physical pillar was doing things that are pretty hard in the physical realm, but then also tying that into the spiritual side. My faith is a big part of my life.
That's great, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I'm very open online with a lot of my TikTok videos about who I am as a Christian, and definitely love sharing that to my audience. Just another layer of who I am is Sell That SaaS. As many of you guys know me online as my handle, Sell That SaaS, but also kind of tell them that, hey, sales is amazing, but I truly couldn't have done all the things I've done in sales without God.
Right.
And so I like to share that I'm just a man I'm just a sales rep. There's things that are bigger than me and I need help. And God always steps in to help me time and time, quarter after quarter. It just seems that he keeps taking care of me. I don't know why, but I'm grateful.
Right. And it took a little while for me to realize it, but part of the reason why I've been successful in my sales career is those God-given gifts of being able to talk to people and relate to people. That doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. So that is definitely a gift that we have, man.
Yeah. And I heard you mention something. You said you're actually probably unlike a lot of people where you wanted to go into sales.
Yeah.
Myself and many of my friends who are in sales right now, we kind of fell into it through, hey, this person's offering an internship. Do you want to work here? It's got some cash. Of course, I said yes. I was broke. But it sounds like you almost wanted to go into this sales realm already knowing the financial reward that comes with a sales career. When you were doing door to door, did you see any of those financial rewards come in at that time? Or was it kind of a delayed, now I see the power of sales once you broke into software sales?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I wasn't super wildly successful in the door-to-door world. It did allow me to, one, get the experience. I knew it was going to be something that I could always put on my resume down the road. But when it came to the financial side of it, is I didn't really start to see that after I jumped into the educational tech world. The door-to-door world, it's a 3 to 6 month sprint of how much money or how hard can we work in that time frame. But the experience during that time was huge. I mean, I recommend a lot of people who even have an inclination of like, hey, I might go into sales, go try to find some form of either door-to-door or cold calling. Like that is the best way to learn as quickly as you possibly can. Is fail as fast as you can, fail forward. And so that's been a big thing when I've coached sales reps in the past, is how quickly can we get you to a point where failure is no longer an option, right? It's like we fail so much, then it's like, okay, I continue to change and get better. And then we see the aha moment. And then it's all up from there.
Yeah, and I'd love your opinion on that, because you mentioned just get a job, cold calling, door to door, something along those lines. It seems online right now that everyone's trying to get into tech sales.
Yep.
Because it's the hot sales job to have. Right. So would you recommend that they actually go get not a software sales job? So for example, a door to door or a cold calling job, just to get some experience put on their resume before that interview? Because I'm in alignment with that, but I wanted to hear your take.
I think like in the software world right now, the tech sales world, everybody's like, oh, I can go in and make a good amount of money pretty quickly, and you can, right? It's like it's the products and the services that we can sell in tech will continue to grow. Like the AE role, the account executive role right now is highly sought after. But yes, I highly recommend going to be an SDR, a BDR, something door to door, some inside sales, just like get some of that experience making calls, right? Like I think especially this day and age, where such a texting world is like getting the skill of being able to talk to people over the phone when the only thing that they want to do is say no, and get them to actually have a conversation with you is truly a skill. And I think that takes a lot of effort and time doing those kinds of things. And then you'll be prepped for an AE role and you'll crush it. So yeah, I highly recommend getting out there just and facing as much rejection as you possibly can.
Yeah. Tell us about that rejection. What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah. Luckily at this point in my career, don't have to do a ton of cold calling anymore. But it's part of the job, right? Is that we're in the sales world. If you're at a 30-40% close rate, you're in the top 1.5%, right? Like you're up there.
If you're closing 30-40% of your demos, you're in the top 1% you think of all software sales reps.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But if you're getting But we take a step back, we look at the cold call. Out of how many cold calls you're setting a meeting, then you're looking at quality and quantity difference, right? It's like, obviously, if we're just making calls to make calls, but then it's the quality conversation. I saw in one of your other episodes about having that conversation and treating that person like a human, right? It's a disruption in their life to take that call. And so to be able to then set a meeting from that, one, that's already a huge step in the right direction. Then getting them to show up to the meetings, obviously another piece of it. But yeah, I think the rejection piece is one we have to be able to roll it off the back and continue to move forward. Because I'm a baseball guy as well, so the best baseball players that ever played got out 7 times out of 10. And so it's I relate that in the sales world is like, if we're closing 3-4 out of 10, we're in the top 1%. So it's a very similar comparison there.
Yeah. Okay. High close rate, typically good seller.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Typically, you obviously need the product market fit, the right pain points to be able to solve for the client. There's all those factors. But I do agree. You have an AE who can close 30-40% of the demos, you're going to be always in a job, whether it's at your current company as top performer or some other place as enterprise or a mid-market seller. So totally agree with what you said. I'm curious though that for my audience, a lot of the audience is a split. I have people who are SDRs who are also AEs, and they're really gunning for that AE journey. Some organizations are 100% full cycle, where the AE is going to be doing all the prospecting, all the closing. It sounds like you're in a role where you're more of just the closer. Is that correct?
I am full cycle right now.
You're full cycle right now.
So we do have an SDR team that works within our organization. But that's very minimal what I do. But I do all my own prospecting. I'm right now I do a bunch of networking. So I work in a very niche industry, senior care, and so I go to a lot of senior care events. I'm like in 7 or 8 networking events a month.
This is something I have no experience in.
Yeah.
So my company hasn't sent me really anywhere. I'm doing an on-site visit this Thursday. In Palatine when I go back home to Chicago, but that was by chance. I met a prospect on Friday, and they said, "Oh, we're in Hoffman Estates." I said, "Oh, I'm from Palatine." We start chopping it up. Now we're working towards a deal, and they said, "Well, you know what? Why don't we sign the contract on Thursday with you here in person so we can ask you questions?" And I was thrilled. I love doing on-site visits, but that's the extent of my on-site or travel experience in software sales. So how often are you traveling, and give the audience some tips on how to be successful at these networking events?
Yeah, and it's a great question. So I luckily here in Phoenix, the Phoenix Valley is large enough to where I don't have to travel a ton. There's plenty of opportunity right here in Phoenix. But my territory, I manage all of Arizona, New Mexico, in part of Southern California at the moment. And so luckily I don't have to travel too much. For actual like sales events with the organization. It's about once a quarter where we're going all over the country. But then we have conferences and these networking events. So just here in Phoenix, I have 8 events per month. And so, so it's usually 1 or 2 a week. And that's just getting out and getting to meet with the people who are doing this. So these are prospects. These are people that I'm either trying to build that relationship with, or they're already my current clients, and I get to continue to build that relationship with. And then the name of the game in sales is referrals and follow-ups, right? And so hopefully that'll continue to grow as well.
So most of your closed business is from these networking events?
It's a good question. I wouldn't say most. It's a good chunk at this point. A lot of referrals from our partnerships and those kinds of things. But those networking events, that's really just the start, right? It's like instead of the start with cold calls, like, hey, let me get you into a meeting. I see these people a couple times a month at a networking meeting, check in with them, right? We're all humans, and being able to say, hey, like, you talked about you're going home for the holidays. What's the plan going to look like, right? It's like you actually get to know this person as a person.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to like, hey, what I actually do is I help businesses like you. And this is how we're going to be able to help it. And so those networking events, kind of to circle back to your question, is like what to do in those to be successful is is almost interject in conversation, right? It's like find somewhere where we can find some common ground, and just be a person. I think that when you think of salespeople at networking events or conferences, is they're the pushy salespeople, right? It's
Sure.
like let me get my product or my service in front of you. But if we can just jump into conversations naturally and just, hey, this is a person that we can talk to about traveling, about fitness, about faith, right? As we can have these real conversations, and then it's like, oh, Logan, what do you do? Right? It's like, oh yeah, I do actually. I'm still working. So I think that's the important part of networking is just be a person first. The business will come.
Yeah, I love that. I think in the past at the conferences I have been at, just because I had that door to door sales experience, I thrive on in person meetups because unlike a cold call, when you go to someone in person, they're not going to slam the door in your face.
Right.
Typically, maybe door to door they will, but when you show up at a business place where I would usually show up, people would usually be kind enough to say, "Hey, look, we're really busy right now, but let me get your information. Let's exchange." And sometimes they just couldn't say no because I'm a human being that's in the room trying to get a chance to talk with them about my product or service. And there's some empathy involved as well.
Right.
And so with these networking events, a lot of these people, you don't want to hard sell them because you want to just treat them as a human being and have empathy up front. And when you do that, people are more likely to be like, "Hey, that was a really good conversation. By the way, what do you do?" Just like what Logan said. And if there's a book, I don't know if you've read it, called How to Win Friends and Influence People.
No, yeah.
I love that book because it really talks about just being a listener. And if
Yep.
there's an audience that's listening right now, definitely pick up the How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. It's timeless. I think it was written in the 70s.
Yeah, it's an older book, yeah.
It's an older book, but it has a lot of gold of how to be an active listener and how just the act of listening will make someone feel like they just had the best conversation of their life by you just being an active listener. So an active listener is actually adding genuine feedback after they go on a monologue. If you ask them, "So what was that like?" Just some questions to kind of get them rolling that actually show them that you are paying attention. And then also there's some little hacks it has where you repeat their first name. People love to hear their own name. So
Yep.
I like that tip as well. So in-person selling, you're telling everyone, hey, treat them as a human first, have empathy, have a real conversation,
Right.
then move to the, hey, this is what I do and this is how we can help you.
Right.
And tell the audience about this follow-up, because there's an influencer I follow. His name's Andy Elliott. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Name sounds familiar.
He's in the Scottsdale area, and he always talks about how he's going to follow up with you more than the next rep. And he's going to follow up with you until you say yes or no, or to the point where you're no longer at the company. He's going to follow up with you that much. And I like that methodology, and I like that mindset. So tell me about how important follow-up is for you after you meet these people at these events.
Yeah. And I always like to use numbers, a big numbers guy. And I think in the software world as a whole, it takes 8 to 10 touch points before you actually ever get the meeting.
Okay.
And then once you get to the meeting, then obviously there's follow-up that gets involved there. But most sales reps, and I wouldn't be able to quote where I got this statistic, but most sales reps stop following up after 2 or 3 touch points. And so the vast majority are missing out on those follow-ups. And so, I mean, it's in most sales books. Fortune is in the follow-up, right? And the more we continue to be that touch point. So I mentioned right now in my career, a lot of my calls aren't cold calls. I've had this conversation before. I've talked to this person, checking in, seeing where we're at in their business cycle. Hey, I sent this email for some value, what's going on in the industry. I want to see if you did get a chance to go through it? Did you have any feedback for me? We have a webinar, whatever it is that I can continue to be a resource.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it comes, because I would say, especially in the software world, there is also a timing component, right? It's like these are businesses that are doing other things in their business, and we have to also meet them where they're at in their business and be able to then provide that software or that product in a good time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you never know when that timing is going to be. Some people will come out and tell you like, "Hey, we're going to be evaluating software in May," and that's you hit gold there. It's like, yeah, I just want to be a part of that conversation. But typically, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 touch points, and it's like, hey, this Logan guy keeps mentioning the things that we do. And it sounds like this might be a good option because they focus on our industry.
Mm-hmm.
We should take a meeting, right? It's like, obviously I've continued to call and ask for that meeting, but now it makes a whole lot more sense because now they know my name, they know the company, and so when we do that follow up, we're going to have much more success
Okay.
down the road. Yeah,
100% agreed. It sounds like you're adding value in your follow-ups.
100%.
So can you tell the sellers about that? Because a lot of sellers, a lot of times will just say, following up on this, any feedback, hey, so-and-so, following up again. And I don't feel like that adds a lot of value, though I do appreciate the fact that they did follow up. I don't know about the value aspect. So tell me about these emails and how you're adding value in those follow-ups.
Yeah, I think the hard part for our sales reps is that balance between being hungry and being starving, right? It's like when we're in a little bit of a slump, we feel like, hey, I need to set this meeting, versus being hungry is just being driven to continue the sales process.
I like that.
And so when we're just like, hey, I'm following up about the meeting that we were supposed to set and I want to set it, that falls on the starving category, right?
Okay.
And that you get that sales breath of like, this guy's kind of desperate for a meeting, versus, hey, I sent over an email around what's going on in the home care industry. It was really good about the different compliance pieces and all that. I wanted to make sure that you guys were up to speed. And so instead of saying, hey, I'm trying to set a meeting, it's like, hey, I sent you this piece of value that's going on with that's relevant to what you're doing in your business. Now let's have a conversation about that versus, hey, let's just set a meeting. And so again, those touch points need to be much more than just, I want to set a meeting. Like, yes, it's a part of it, but when we can continue to bring value, we're not just a salesperson anymore. We're somebody who is giving to them just as much as we're going to get back.
The value piece is huge.
Yeah.
Finding a case study that your company has on the website, webinars Logan mentioned. There's a lot of other things that you can find just from your company's marketing materials that you could send as a touch point. So for me, when I haven't heard from someone in a while, it's kind of frustrating because we had all this momentum going into what we thought was going to be a sale. And so what I'll say is I'll send them an email. I'll say, hey, so-and-so, thinking of you, thought you might appreciate this piece. And I'll link like a case study.
Yeah.
And I'll say, thought you might appreciate this piece, particularly the part of how XYZ brand scaled their influencer program from 50 to 300. Reminded me a lot of our conversations about your influencer goals. Best. See you later.
Yeah.
And
personalized, focus on the impact of their business. Like that's perfect. Yeah.
And those aren't always going to get me a response.
Right.
At the same time, though, with an agreement with Logan, you're not being the typical sales rep of, hey, following up on this, hey, following up on this. You're actually adding value, and people will remember that in their buying journey of software, and they might try and evaluate a competitor. Even if they evaluate a competitor, they'll realize that a lot of sales reps are not that good. And a lot of sales reps are very basic. They do the same things Logan and I were talking about, the hey, following up. And they'll remember you because I've had people come back to me time and time again and say, hey, to be candid with you, we were going to go with X, Y, and Z, but you made us feel that we could trust you by giving us the realness and being a resource to us, and that means the world to me.
Right.
And you were talking earlier about how relationships are everything in sales.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, is there anything that's really worked well for you when it comes to getting a referral from a client? Do you have a certain way that you ask for a referral?
No, not really. I just continue to try to add value to them, right? As I think the other piece of that, like one, getting marketing materials from the company are great, but also becoming an expert in what you do, right? It's like we work for 8, 9 hours of the day. We have other things in our lives, but spend a couple of hours continuing to become an expert in your field. If you guys look at any of my posts on LinkedIn or socials, it's like I'm just continuing to add thought leadership for what's going on in the industry that I work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that continuing to sharpen my own pencil on what I do and what my prospects are doing on a day-to-day basis, then brings me into that conversation, right? It's like, now it's like, oh, I actually know what nurses and caregivers and the senior living communities are actually doing on a day-to-day basis. Then it's not like, hey, let me just talk to you about my software. It's like, hey, let me tell you why bringing on more nurses during this time of Q4 is going to be important for you here in Arizona. It's like, it's a completely different conversation. And so then again, building that relationship, you mentioned, is trust, right? We do business with people we know, like, and trust.
Sure.
And the one, continue to see your face. One thing I was never a huge fan of software sales early on in my career is having cameras off.
Oh,
Right.
gosh.
Like I
Dude.
don't understand. It's like a lot of us make our money because of the way we're able to talk to people and express and be excited for them when they see the impact, right? It's like, have your camera on, let them see your face, like, let them know we are a person too. And when we're able to show our facial expressions and all those things, that, hey, this is what I truly believe is going to impact your business, and be serious about it, and be excited, like, oh wow, I like just being able to process your payroll a little bit quicker. You're going to save 250 hours a quarter in man hours. Like that can change the trajectory of a business.
Yeah.
And being excited about that, and they can see your excitement as well, is huge in that process. And again, it's all about knowing, liking, and trusting you.
Yeah, I think throughout this conversation, I definitely see that you are a sales rep that brings the facts, which I appreciate. I think that's good. When you come into a conversation, you come in with, hey, this is what's going on in the industry. This is what I see from other people, and almost puts you in the lens of a consultant,
Right.
rather than just a sales rep for a piece of software. So I appreciate that.
Right.
And I think that you should keep doing that, because I think I'm just listening to you talk, and I'm putting myself in a buyer's seat of, like, the way that I hear you talk about, hey, this is the reason why it'd be a good move. It's almost like a matter of fact.
Right.
Like, these are the facts.
Right.
It would be a mistake if you didn't do this, but you're not going to just outright say it's a mistake, but you're pretty much just saying, this is the facts that are going to make you successful.
Becomes a no-brainer, right?
You
It's like, if we can lay it out. And so part of my sales process, and I can't coin this myself. This is part of the organization that I work with, but we do an ROI, a business case analysis, what their current processes look like compared to what life would look like with my software. And we talk about not only a dollar savings from eliminating some process, but also time, right? It's like, when I first got into B2B sales, I was like, well, B2B is all about the numbers, right? It's like, yes, and it kind of is, right? It's like, it does need to make financial sense to make an investment in a product or service. But, like, these people are also people, and they are in their business for a particular reason. I always like to ask, hey, what brought you into the home care world or the healthcare world? It's like, why are we here? And it's like, majority of them, I would say like 99% of them, have a personal experience with something, with their family members, their parents, and why they're here. And so being able to then have that conversation of, like, this is going to now change your life because of the time and money savings, and that you wanted to be able to provide care to more people. That's why we're here. Not, hey, I'm just selling a software that's going to make it more streamlined. Right? It's like that just sounds like every other salesperson out there, right? It's like let's help streamline your operations.
It's what
like,
every salesperson says.
Right? It's like
software sales.
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna make everything faster and more streamlined for you. That's like going into a car lot and hearing the same thing from every car sales rep.
Right.
Looking for a new car. It's like no. What I want to do is be able to have this part of my business and have an impact in that. And so, it's super important to understand that the people that we're dealing with are also people, and then how it's going to impact their business with numbers. Right. The numbers are still there, but it's how it's going to impact them as a person.
Yeah. It sounds to me that we have a similar type of current state, future state type of environment where you're showing them this is where you're at right now. This is where you'll be with our software.
Right.
And ROI numbers are great. Facts are great on the number of time that they'll save or the money they'll make, but also hitting that personal aspect of, let's talk about the pain you'd experience personally if you did not onboard our software.
Right.
And it's not anything that needs to be scary when you're talking to a prospect about this, but a question that I love to ask buyers, what happens if you remain the status quo and you don't onboard a new software like the one you're evaluating? And you'll hear a bunch of different answers. You'll hear sometimes, oh, well, if we remain status quo, it's just the way it is. Then I'll tag in another member. I'll say, Nikki, what do you think happens if you guys remain the same? Oh, well, that's not an option.
Right.
we can't do this anymore because it's causing us too many headaches and we need to make a switch. So as a seller, then you have a little bit more ammo in your tool belt of saying, they pretty much just admitted to me they're going to make a buy, but I have to now work with them that this buy with our software is the right choice for them based on their pain points, based on their experiences, and aligning on what they need, not what I need.
Right.
I think a lot of sellers make that mistake where they feel that they have to just have the same type of sale for every single buyer, and they generalize. They say, hey, we're going to streamline your business. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And though that may work for someone who's hasn't bought software before, is a little bit naive, most buyers out there are very aware that they want to feel heard. Right. They want to feel that the seller really understands what they need. And the best buying experiences I've had as a buyer have been through someone who understands what I need.
Right.
They don't take me through a standard demo. They ask me what's most important to me in my day-to-day, and they start there. And a lot of times you don't even need to show the whole tool, the whole platform.
Right.
You can just show the parts that are relevant to that person.
Right.
And that's enough for the sale, because I feel like sometimes when you show the whole tool, it can almost be overwhelming where someone's like, I really only wanted this piece, but now I feel overwhelmed thinking that I have to manage the entire software.
Right.
So focus on the buyer, focus on what they need, and you'll find yourself just getting more and more sales through relationships and being that person that someone can trust and say, wow, they really understood me. So
one of my favorite quotes is, instead of keep it simple, stupid, right? It's like, don't overcomplicate it. I've always coined it as keep it super simple. Is make it make sense to that person. Like it may make sense for us, right? It's like we get in the zone with our processes, and we feel like we're going through demos, we're doing all these things, and that feels really good for us. But if we keep it simple and what's going to make sense for them, that's when they become a true buyer. Is like I'm not just demoing software to demo software. I'm demoing it to them and how it's going to impact their business. And then it's like, okay, how much of the product am I going to get? It's not a yes or no, it's how much.
Okay.
And so that's where I find myself in a lot of my processes when it comes down to it. It's like, because we have multiple products in our service, and so it's not a yes or no. It's, well, we're going to start with this, and then we can always add these things later. So you get to a point where it makes a lot more sense to them and not sense to us, right? We have to paint the picture for their business, not the way we want it. I like that.
What's your average deal size?
So I think revenue-wise, so it's based on an annual basis. I think I'm anywhere from 8 to 12K.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not
Nice.
huge, but I've had clients in the six figures. I've had,
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends.
Those deals are a little bit more complex typically.
Yeah.
The six figures.
Yeah.
So, okay, I was just curious. What do you think I had a couple questions for you, but now I want to do like current state, future state. What's the most challenging part about being an account executive in software sales that you feel like people are not really aware of?
It's a really good question. I would say like the juggling of or managing your time, right? Is like figuring out like, hey, this is my prospecting time, this is my demoing time, this is my paperwork time. Like there's all of these tasks that we have to do in an AE role, and most AEs won't have to do a ton of prospecting, but fostering those relationships for long term is also a part of the business, right? That's where we get referrals and that follow up. So I think being really good at managing your time is underestimated in an AE role. Is like we need to spend time in each one of these buckets. That's how we keep a consistent pipeline of deals flowing through. But if we just focus on say prospecting, for example, if I'm only focusing on hunting all the time, my deals further down the pipeline are going to fall through because my demos suck. Right. Or like I'm just doing a generalized demo for everybody. And the ones that should be deals are falling off because there wasn't personalized to them. And so it's a fine balance between being really good at feeding the pipeline, but then fostering the pipeline. And then there's always the closing part, right? It's like we gotta figure out a way that's going to make it make sense for them financially, personally, emotionally, right? It's like these people are people, and making sure it makes sense to them on all those levels. And so I think that's the hardest part, that a lot of people are like, oh, I want to get into tech sales and I want to jump in as quickly as I can. It's like, yes, do that when you can, but know that you will also continue to refine your process as you grow.
Okay. How do you deal with the pressure of hitting quota every quarter?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a tough one, man. I think that's where a lot of sales reps either they burn themselves out, or that's where they struggle to stay in a sales career. I've been fairly lucky in how I blessed, is what I would rather say, is that quota will come and it will go. And as long as we continue to focus on the little processes that work up to quota, we'll hit it.
Yeah.
And so I think the overarching quota, right? We actually look at a year quota and then a monthly quota, right? If I were to look at my yearly quota as a whole, it's like, well, I'm never going to get there, right? It's like I'm looking at staring down the barrel of $500,000 in revenue. But if I break that down, like, hey, this is what I need to do on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis, on a weekly basis, on a daily basis. You break it down into these bite-sized pieces. It's like, oh, I actually just need to make 20 calls a day.
Yeah.
It's like, right? Like it's really not as complicated as we like to see it as.
Yeah, I like that. My account executive, when I first started working with him, he said, think of each month as if you're a football team in the NFL.
Right.
And break your quota up into months. And he said, okay, let's say you miss a month. You're the Patriots. You lose a game. Okay, no worries. Dust yourself off. Go on a 4-game win streak. Now you're 4-1. You lose another one. Okay, 4-2. As long as you could finish out the year 9-3,
above 500,
right? above 500, you're gonna be in a good place.
Yeah.
And it's so true to the NFL, right? You make the playoffs if you have a winning record.
Yeah.
And in software sales, as Logan said, because I'm with you, man. I've looked at my quota for the year, and I said at times I looked at it and I said that seems a bit high, but then my AE. Well, I'm an AE now, but when I was an SCR, I had my account executive, Eric, and he said, just look at it as a game. Each month,
gamify it, yeah.
Each month is a game of the NFL and your football team, and you want to do your best to win, but you're gonna have some losses. It's rare a team goes to the Super Bowl and they've never lost a game.
Right.
It's maybe it's been done before, but it's definitely rare. And even the best teams in the world have lost a couple games. So I think as a seller who has a quota, the pressure is real. Don't let the pressure control you and control the way that you behave and kind of shut you down. Just look at it as, I'm going to lose some, but hopefully I'm going to win more than I lose. And from there, you'll be able to excel. I wanted to ask you, because you started out the conversation by saying something that I agree with a lot with the finances of software sales. And I never set out to make a lot of money. I feel like I'm not a millionaire. I'm not anything like that, but software sales has allowed me to have a good career, have a good earnings. And I'm so always will be so grateful for that. But for you, like how much of that plays into you staying in software sales? And do you feel like you're going to make a lifelong career out of this? Do you feel like you're just going to be in it for the next decade or more?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. I've always said I'll probably be in sales forever, in some shape or form. And if you look at a lot of sales books or self-development books, we are always in sales, whether it's your title or not. And it's like we're always selling ourselves as a person, whether that's on a first date, whatever, right? It's like we're always in some sort of sales environment. But I think the financial side of it, and again, extremely blessed in my career. But the biggest piece is it's our job is just a job, and that's something to remember, especially in the sales world, right? Is like when we start taking sales home, our job home, that's when it starts affecting the rest of our life. That it is. I see my career more as a vehicle, a vessel to be able to do the things that I want to do with my life. So, yes, to answer the question, I do believe I'll be in some shape or a form of sales my entire life. But that I'm sure that'll change. Even over the last decade, it's been in multiple facets. So I think it'll always be there, but it just allows me to do the things that I want to do.
I like that, bro. Yeah. And it, to me, I loved. I think I'm curious for you. When you bring the work home, you mentioned that. How do you manage that? How do you have all these things occur at work and still be able to check yourself and not bring that home?
Yeah, and I struggled at first. So especially right when quarantine. So I've actually worked from home since quarantine. So March of 2020, and it's definitely tough. Like for the first. And again, at the time, I was managing an international business. I had team members all over the world, and so I had teams reps in the UK. I had rep in Australia. So I had somebody online 24/7. So it was very easy for me to, hey man, how you doing? Right? It's like, hey, how did that call go? How did that demo go? Right? It's like it's very easy to do that. And so for me, it came to a point of, hey, I'm tired now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's not okay to be tired all the time. Like we have people in our lives that we want to be able to spend time with. And again, that's ultimately why we're here is that connection. And I think that's a big part of our lives is that community and in our faith is like, we're called to love on the people around us. And if we're bringing home stress and work all the time, we fail in that area.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to do that. So how I've done it is I have a dedicated space just for work. And it's, hey, when I'm in this bubble of my work, I'm all in. Right. Yeah. It's like, this is my work time. And this is, I'm gonna dedicate it. And I think another part, especially working from home, is doing it in bite-sized pieces, right? It's like sitting in front of your computer all day when you're at home is brutal. It's not easy to do. And so take a 5-minute walk throughout the day, get outside, see the sun. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we live in Arizona,
Blessed.
Right? is the sun. We get to see the sun as much as possible. So taking those small little breaks throughout the day is super important. But then when it's done, when the day is done, like I don't even touch that bubble again.
Okay.
Yeah.
That to me is like very reassuring of how I live, because I used to struggle with it too, where I would burden my mom with all these things that happened at work. This is happening. Oh my gosh, mom, and then she's just kind of listening, and God bless her because she's my mom. She has to listen. But there's people in your life who don't have to listen to you. And I think as I've gotten older, and my girlfriend and I have been dating 10 months, I know you're engaged.
Yeah.
When I hang out with my girlfriend, or when I say, okay, we're going out to dinner and it's after a day of work, maybe you could relate to this, but I think typically, they don't want to hear all the horror stories. They want you to be present in that moment. Sure, they want to know a little bit, and I'll give them some cliff notes of how the day was,
Right.
but I don't like to harp on how challenging my day was. When I'm with my significant other, I'm 100% present with them, and that to them matters more than to them just kind of being a soundboard for how difficult your job is in at sales. Well, of course, sales is difficult.
Right.
Of course, sales is difficult, and you can kind of inform people in your lives that yes, I have a difficult career. There's going to be ups and downs, but it's your job as a sales rep to manage those emotions and to manage those personal relationships and be able to come home and be a present brother, husband, whatever it might be, sister, wife, friend, you name it, coach. There's a bunch of things that people need you to be present for. And sales, as Logan said, is just a job. It's not your identity. It's just an addition to who you are as a person. And it does allow you to have some really great experiences through the financial gains of sales. And I'm like you, I'm going to be in sales for the rest of my life. At least I feel in some aspect, because every single role in your life is a sales role. You're always selling yourself, putting your best foot forward. And I'd recommend, if you wanted to, I feel like you might find it useful, check out a book called Slight Edge.
Okay.
By Jeff Olson. You'd really like it. I feel like for you talk about these daily things that kind of compound over time.
Yeah.
That's what the book talks about. It's not finance. It's not anything spiritual. It's more of just a real world experience of different examples in life of how small daily activities can build up over time. And I think in sales too, it's just a culmination of day in, day out. You show up. To kind of recap what Logan said, right? You see this huge quota for the year. It's so daunting and so intimidating. But you break it down, I just have to make 20 calls today, and then 20 calls the next day. And I have to send 20 emails this Friday. It's just the small daily things. And when you add them all together, you somehow are at quota or above, and you're thinking, how did I do that? But it was the things you did when no one's looking. So, brother, I really appreciate everything you've shared, and just the human aspect that you add to sales. I think you definitely add a calm, cool, factual approach to your selling journey. And I think as a buyer, I would appreciate that. If I was buying from you, I'd be like, hey, this guy, he knows what he's talking about. So 2 questions for you to wrap. I ask this for every guest. One question is, who do you look up to the most in your life? Personal. And why?
First one's God, and I'll take that cop out, because as a man of faith, that's an easy answer. But I also think it's important to have mentors here while we're with our time on earth. But there's a couple of people in my life. I've had sales coaches, I've had regional managers, people who have poured a ton into me and my experience. But there's people I've surrounded myself with now that are not pouring into just one area, right? For the longest time, it was like, oh, this is my fitness coach, this is my sales coach, this is my financial coach. Now I have people who I can talk to about a few things, right? Because those do bleed over into each other, right? It's like my finances and my career go hand in hand.
Yes, they do.
And it really, if we're looking at it, how I'm treating my body also goes into my career, right? Like if I'm tired all the time, my job's I'm not going to be as good at my job, right? Because I'm tired and I don't have that extra motivation to just do a little bit of extra work. And so I think having somebody that speaks into your life in multiple aspects, and speaks into you as a person, is extremely helpful. And so that's just what I've done is I've been able to tie a couple of people, especially older people who with wisdom, that have gone through different careers, different seasons in their life, and speak to different areas of my life. Right, as I'm getting married in February. So we talked about it before we hopped on. Is couples who have had a successful marriage and being able to speak life into that is extremely important. So people who can speak into multiple areas of your life, that's really been my big focus over the last couple of years.
I think a lot of people are struggling to find a mentor and they don't know how to go about it. I believe it starts with humility,
Right.
of saying that I need help in this area. You have something that I want, admitting that, and then learning from them. It's a
Right.
lot of wisdom that can be shared through older people
Right.
specifically.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
it's like to that point is like if you ever get to go and talk to somebody who's older, and you just treat them as a person, they're more than willing to share.
Yeah.
Like they're like you hear it all the time these days. Is like once somebody's super successful, they gets out of their career, they're like, how can I give back? It's like all you have to do is be. I love the humility piece. Is like I would love to just pick your brain. I would just love to learn as much as I can from you. You've seen the world. You've done these things. How can I be of service to you so I can just learn? Yeah. So I love that.
Okay, bro. Thanks for that personal. Well, last one for you. What's one mistake you see sellers making across the industry or across reps that you've managed in the past that you'd like to give advice on?
And I think we've already mentioned a little bit. I think the follow-up piece is so important. I mentioned already, fortune is in the follow-up. And again, it's not just our initial call and continuing to get all those touch points till we get into our first meeting, but it's like, how are you going to differentiate yourself in that first email follow-up? Right? It's like, am I just putting a template in there, say, hey, here you go, this is what we talked about? Or say, hey, based on our conversation, we talked about XYZ. This is what our software is going to be able to do for you. I'm excited to show you the demo next week. Right? It's like that type of follow-up. And then the next piece is like after the demo, same thing. What we call is a half call, a touch point in between is like, hey, I know it's been a few days since we last talked. We had this conversation, or we had this point where I was going to go follow up for you and get an answer. Like let's have that conversation now. And so that piece right there is how we will continue to differentiate ourselves. Whereas like if we look at it, there in my role, just in my company, there's 35 other people who do exactly what I do, just in different territories. Then you multiply that times all of the other businesses that are selling the exact same product and service out there. Yeah, we have some niche focuses in our industry, but the product overall is essentially the same.
Sure.
Right. And so I'm not only competing in this industry there, but like all the other sales reps out there, as how am I going to differentiate myself? And the easiest way to do that is with a follow-up, is how we respond after a meeting, how we respond after a phone call, it's like one of the things that I've always done, and it was actually almost by necessity with when we went to quarantine days, working from home started to blend together, right? It was like it might be Thursday today.
Yeah.
And so at the end of my emails, every single day, every email I write, I always say Happy Wednesday, Happy Monday, and I always will start as like, hey, how was your weekend? How's the week going? And so those different pieces to, again, not just, hey, Will,
Yeah.
we talked about this last week. Looking forward to our demo. It's like, it's just how are we going to differentiate? It is so important.
That's gold, bro. Fortune is in the follow-up, everyone. I got a gift for you because I know you're a golfer and that's how we met. So it's an official guest of the Sell That SaaS podcast,
Awesome.
golf ball. So feel free to use it. Feel free to hold on to it. Who knows?
Yeah.
But this guy is a good golfer. Really good.
I'm all right.
I got to give him some credit. So everyone, this is an awesome episode. Each episode, we bring a different type of seller, different type of individual on the show. Logan really, I think, demonstrated that he's an empathetic seller. He can come in with the facts. He can understand the buyer. He can talk to them at a human level and then move into business later. I think there's a lot of value here for everyone, especially in his points in regards to the follow-up. Logan, how can people find you? Because we want to be able to get you a bunch of new followers, a bunch of new traction to your page, maybe even someone who is in the space that could use your software that's maybe listening to this podcast, how can people find you?
Yeah, number one is LinkedIn. I stay on LinkedIn. It's how we've stayed in touch.
Yeah.
But it's LinkedIn is my number one because I wanted that's the face of my own brand, the brand of my company. LinkedIn is the first place, and I would love to be able to connect you with either a mentor or somebody else who may be able to help out your business or you individually. That's what the LinkedIn's for, is to be able to make those connections. So that's number one place you can find me.
Perfect. You guys connect with him on LinkedIn. I'll link all of his LinkedIn. I'll link his LinkedIn in the podcast description, as well as when I post some clips on LinkedIn, tag you. And also, if you're in the Scottsdale area, Logan and I are both local to the area, and we'd love to meet you. And if you feel that you want to come check out a workout, message Logan. He runs workouts 3 times a week. Get in there, get a chance to connect with him. And there's a bunch of other guys who are older who have a lot of wisdom that you can just mine gold from, but it's up to you to mine it. So feel free to message us. We're always happy to help. And thank you for the 4th episode of the Sell That SaaS podcast. We're going to be taking a 2-week break for the holidays. We'll come back in the new year. As always, thank you.